Come together, tight now, or come together right now. One of the revising short constructed responses and multiple choice is what is the best way to combine sentences blank and blank? You're not adding anything, removing, or replacing. All you're doing is moving. Revision is the changing the order or the organization of the words and or phrases around to make more sense without changing meaning or content. So I have my little yellow monkeys here because yellow stands for, you can see they look like little S's, sentence blank and blank. And we're going to come together. We're going to join these two as one complete thought without changing the meaning, without anything missing, repetition, run on, make sure the subject is there, the predicates, make sure it's specific. If you're going to change something to something else, it has to be similar or mean the same thing, also known as a synonym. If you're going to be in present tense, you should probably be in present tense on your combining. And we're going to get into all of that for seventh grade. Welcome to seventh grade SCR revising. One of you asked me in TikTok world, what about social studies, science, US history, biology? So what I'm going to do on this seventh grade SCR is use my form that I utilize to grade uh, all responses in all grade levels to analyze not just what score a student gets, but why the score is what it is, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna show you that. First, I'll show you on the test paper that your students see, and then we'll go to, let me take away my background just so that we don't have any foggy images or anything like that. All right, there we go. All right, so just as a reminder, what you want to make sure your kids do is follow whatever your rules for reading, editing, and revising might be, whether they be in multiple choice or short constructed, extended constructed, because it can be applied to writing as well. Because we want to A, read the question, which is to the right, the prompt and the sentences or sections, which will be to the left. So on my lined blank paper, read the prompt to the right, read the sentence or sentences that it's about in the computer. Then you have to understand that silence is deadly in a classroom of auditory learners. So we're going to read solo because the scores are so low. We got to do something different. And it stands for SO softly in a testing situation or with a partner, or LO loudly if we're reading with the whole class and with the group. And why do I have these weird little pictures? Because if you see something and then you get your kids to open your mouth and say it softly or loudly, hopefully they'll be hearing, but actually listening as well. Then they'll start to think of whatever strategies you taught them. If not, they might have to look it up in their online book or paper book called Dictionary Thesaurus. Then they'll hopefully be able to write the right answer. After the R, and even though this is, just my rules, we all pretty much teach the same thing. I just wanted to make sure the kids would remember it. I have this in English and Spanish. Make sure you understand the question. What is it asking relevant to the sentences that we're going to be reading about in revising. Labeling. Make sure you highlight the important information in the question and the selection, whatever type it might be. Multiple choice, eliminate and explain. Normally there's going to be 3 that you eliminate. Eliminate and explain your wrong answers, or because now we have SCR and ECR, enter your response in the box provided. This could be a short constructed response reading where it's answer and evidence, possibly a short constructed response revising where it has to do with getting rid of repetition, changing the order of words so that they make the most sense, and combining sentences like the one we're going to do. So we would do that. Then we're going to select the correct answer, but once we've done, we would make sure we submit. Something that's going to help also when you're entering a response, think of an S that's not here, but side by side. Make sure that the selection that you're going to be using, the sentences that we're going to be looking at, should be side by side with the box that we'll be writing the response in. And then the reminder, if we show the strategies on our lab, our lined and blank paper, like that I was sharing with you right here, the things that I show you are going to be on line paper so that you can have a checklist and you can see how the students are following your directions that you taught all year. Because if all they do is online, there's very little that you can check. So they should at least show some strategies you can tell to your kids in order to get complete credit for these questions. This question here, you must show some strategies on paper, lined or blank. Okay. The next thing, for those of you who have not seen her yet, Mrs. PVC for editing, revising is going to be anything. She's got all these E's for hair. Is if any, those are going to be eliminate. If anything is, the meaning has changed or something's missing, if we find repetition or run-on in some cases, if the subject changes or if it's not specific anymore and it was before, if you're going to use a different word or phrase, is it a synonym, something similar, or something that means the same? If so, that's acceptable. If not, then you would not be able to do that. That's mainly for short constructed responses. Did the predicate stay the same? Did the point of view, is if it's first person, then it needs to stay first person. Are we actually responding to the prompt? What is it? Whatever it's asking us to do. Since revising is improving content, if they don't keep the cups, the editing, the conventions strong, they can still get the point, because remember that the rules are you're graded down for not improving the content, even though we do want good conventions. If the verb tense changes, is it past, present, future? Is the response too vague? Because we're going to get rid of things that are vague and keep things that are more specific. And does the content change? And so I went ahead and did that for you on our chart that I'll be showing you. So here's me reading. What are we going to be reading? We're going to read the prompt, then we'll read the sentences that it happens to be about. This was 7th grade, question number 30. It only got 65% correct. That means 1 out of every 3 kids in Texas did not know how to combine 2 consecutive sentences. All right. So here's our reading the prompt. It's going to be similar to a question without a question mark. Marcy wants to combine, come together, tight now, the ideas in sentence 10 and 11. So I'll highlight 10 and 11. Also, an important detail, combine so that your students think of that little song in their head that'll pop up. Write a new sentence that combines these ideas in a clear and effective way. Okay. You only get the point if it's a complete sentence and it is clear and effective because it's the sentence that expresses, that being the sentence. Okay. So the rubric has 8 samples that they gave us and why they got zeros. And so if these were your students' responses, I'm going to show you how those of you who have signed up for my reading and writing recorded training can use my quick check to kind of write in the students. They can actually write them on these forms here, and you would be able to determine how they did. All right. Just as a reminder, it was prompt question number 30 from the 7th grade SCR revising. Reminder again, Marcy wants to combine, come together, tight now. The ideas in sentences 11 and 10 and 11 in the space provided. Write a new sentence that combines these ideas in a clear, effective way. All right, so left side is all going to be over here. I have what I use a Teeter Totter because everything here on the left side is something that I could be teaching in reading, editing, revising, even writing, science, social studies in both short constructed and multiple choice format. And for now, we'll just use it for revising. The one that we're going to be working on is combining sentences. And just for those of you who are not aware, when you're combining sentences, think of rocks. It is revision, but what kind of revision are we doing? R, repetition. O, the order or the organization will be changing. Or C, will be combining. And this one happens to be combining. So we're going to do our little teeter totter. So imagine that this sentence over here is the teeter. Then we have our transition to our sentence 11, the totter. Okay, so the content has to stay intact. So let's double check what we have up here on top. Shift I, first person, pronoun I. So that content has to be there. I once wore them. That means your students who didn't bother reading sentence 9 because they have very limited ability, you might want to find out what sentence 9 is. And so you have, Bill, what is sentence 9? Well, let's go check. I've worn my Andes on class trips where we've had to walk for miles. Okay. So apparently walking is something that you need these capital Andes for. So some of your kids might have had to infer that those were shoes. And you can see that if you check sentence 13, that these shoes have never let me down. So if you guess shoes, then that would be right. But Andes are also a mountain. And so your kids might incorrectly infer that they're wearing a mountain, which would not make sense. Okay. So everything that I did here uh, highlighting. What you can do is highlight and then stop in the computer. But I would probably have your kids go ahead and write out the sentence on lined paper, breaking it down like this. This is what you did. This is who did it to a musical festival. All right. So the thought is complete. Can't see if that period's there or not. I'll send this by the time that you guys see this video, it'll already have been sent to all of you who signed up for the reading and writing training because I do have 4 zeros here and we'll discuss why they got zeros using that acronym Mrs. PVC. And then we'll talk about the next 4, why they got ones. And the cool thing is I have 2 blank pages for you where the students can write down uh, the question that you give them. They can write down the sentences like you see here in the next spaces, and then the possible corrections. And in the case of short constructed response, it'll be one of the rocks ideas: repetition, order, organization, or combining sentences using the Teeter and the Totter. We've got to have everything on the Teeter and everything on the Totter come together so that we can have a phrase that does make sense. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at sentence 11. So the problem that happens, even though this is a complete thought, the word this takes away some of the clarity that we know that we're wearing something. And so we have to make sure that the reader doesn't get confused that this is the shoes or that this is the festival that we went to. And so that's the reason that we're going to combine the sentences to bring clarity to whatever this was in some way. Involved, what? Lots of standing and dancing, because it's 2 different things. We would need both of those things to be there. Standing, and if you want to separate them, that's fine. You have to have standing though and dancing. So we have to figure out, how do I bring those sentences together? Let's find out why the first response got a 0. All right. It said there, apostrophe S, a music festival. Well, this one is missing some content. The content is missing. I and wore them is not there. So right away, hopefully your students would recognize, like if this was multiple choice, they would recognize I can't pick something that removes that much content. The second half, there is a lot of dancing and a lot of food. Well, dancing is there, but food, because food is not what was in the selection, this content that was added, you can't add content because it ends up changing the meaning of the sentence. There was nothing in there about food in the original sentence. So by adding food, you're taking away from the meaning. Also, it doesn't help that they're changing, focusing on the dancing and the food instead of the festival with that word there. That's not why this was there. So we got to pick a different one. So we would, and then they join them together with the word and. And it's okay to use and you're going to notice some kids did that and they forgot their comma, but because the comma is a conventions thing, we would allow that to be missing as long as they joined the ideas correctly. Let's take a look at response two that got 0 points. I, that's still there, once wore them. So far, so good. To a music festival. Okay. Now there's no longer a period because we're removing it to join comma this. So whenever there's a situation that's combining sentences, one thing that you cannot do is have a comma with this. Uh, that street, that sentence called the street was ending there and starting with the word this would create what is known as a run-on. So we would eliminate that because this part here creates a run-on, even though there's dancing, all of the other parts are there. You cannot have a run-on when you're combining sentences and earn the point. Response three, that got a 0. I, pronoun, yes, once wore them to a festival. So some content is missing. Uh, music festival is missing. So they took something specific and they made it vague. So those are two things that you might think about, comma, which involved lots of physical movement. So instead of saying comma, which is okay, because they are using which to talk about the festival, but physical movement takes the specificness of standing and dancing to to physical movement, which is vague. So on this side, we would eliminate it because we went from specific to something vague, and that's not going to be enough to cut it. So we had a couple of reasons why we eliminated response number three as earning a point. Okay. And if this was multiple choice, you'd be writing down the letter and then you'd be deciding is it correct or is it incorrect. So that's the kind of cool thing about using this. You can multitask with this little chart here. And you can see a lot of reading skills here, a lot of writing skills connecting one idea. A transition allows you to get from one idea to the next, one sentence to the next, one detail to the next, one paragraph to the next. So the teeter is everything on this left side, the totter is everything on the right, the C is on the left, the saw is on the right. And I remember seeing one where they changed the order. So if John is sitting here and Mary is sitting over here, and they just switch places, the order is okay to switch as long as they're all still there, if that makes sense, as long as it doesn't change the content, that both John and Mary are doing whatever it is mentioned in the sentence. Let's look at response four and see why they decided to give 0 points to that one. I, the pronoun, first person, once wore them to a music festival. Everything is intact there. Let's see how they connected it. Comma, this. So once again, they broke the run-on rule. So I'm going to make sure that we write run-on. so that we can, that's called justifying your answer. So they would be putting that on. We want to make sure that when we're checking, when we're using examples like this, I would say that anybody um, eighth grade and higher should be able to use any of the revising questions from third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh because they were all pretty difficult. None of them did very well. In fact, I think this is the only one that scored in the 60s. All the other questions scored in the 50s and the 40s. So we can tell that revising was difficult. So I highly recommend that you practice these and go over them with your students for this year and last year and the year before, so they can see all of the grade levels that are before them. The only reason I don't recommend anybody in third through seventh grade going over these is because if your district decides to use them as a seventh grade benchmark, well, for sure seventh grade will remember long enough to know what to do. Now, if you do it with third, fourth, fifth, some of these questions are not going to be too difficult, but I would highly recommend that you don't use ones that they could possibly see later from the district as like a benchmark or um, a testing sample. Okay. So we also decided that starting a sentence with the second sentence with the Totter with this comma, this activity involves you to stand and dance. Um, that that could work. This activity is, I I guess you can assume that they're talking about what you're doing at the music festival. Um, let's find out the difference between those though and the ones. So over here, we would be selecting the R once again for a run-on. You cannot have an answer that's a run-on. And so before this is my suggestion, before my kids would have to write things, students are better at reading than they are at writing. And so let's help them understand what gets 0 points before we try to teach them how to get 1 point. So let's compare now to the ones. What did they do? And once again, it's I once wore them, past tense, to a musical festival where this musical festival involved lots of standing and dancing, two things that you did a lot of while you were there. All right, let's check and see how did they decide to come together right now. I once wore them to a music festival. Everything is exactly the same on response number 1 in the TEA rubric. And this involved lots of standing and dancing. And I'm going to make sure I don't have a period there, but I might have just forgotten to put it. Standing, yes, it is there. So circle that so I don't forget to fix that on my final draft for you guys. But either way, the comma being missing here, slowing the sentence down, and even if that period was not there, stopping the sentence, those would not cause the student to lose a point, because I did mention that as long as the student is improving conventions, they would still earn the point. So on multiple choice, yes, you won't find cups errors, but on short constructed responses, you are going to find them. And again, that you can see here on the bottom, it's multiple choice, drop down, and SCR answer choices that you go from the question to the passage and check for some of these things here. Okay. very practical, I feel. Let's check the next one. See again what earned. So there was a sentence, there was another sentence, and they said, how are you going to join them? The student decided to join them with the word that. I once wore them to a music festival. Content still the same. That involved lots of standing and dancing. Standing and dancing. All the content is still there, and they use the word that. So some of your students might get confused. Well, how come I can't use this? Well, this for the sake of understanding this is like a subject that is used often like which to help give more information about the first sentence. So whenever you have words like that or which that are telling you more, you can substitute or add in the word that so you can join these two sentences together. Okay. The next one. I once wore them to a music festival. Everything exactly the same. The content stays the same. Notice I'll check that. Everything checks off the meeting. There's no run-on, there's no repetition. The subject is still there, the predicate, the verb tenses are all correct. But this time they say, let's join these two with a semicolon. Okay. Now, the typical rules of a semicolon are that the second sentence in the two does not need to be capitalized unless we're talking about a proper noun. And so when you look at the folder, I'm going to show that to you real quick. Take a look at the reading and writing guide. And right now we're working on editing. But I do want to show you, we're working on revising, but I do want to show you, I have commas, apostrophe contractions, colon and semicolon yellow because it just slows the sentence down. That's different from stopping the sentence, red, stop signs, period, exclamation, question mark. Okay. So you can do that. And the student did start the next word with a lowercase t, which is the way it was supposed to be done. But even if they would have put a capital there, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that, well, you know what? Because of the idea of joining two sentences, I'm wondering if they would give the point if that capital was there, even though that's an editing thing. That's kind of an iffy one. So if you're watching this and you've seen where they either gave the point for a capital on it after a semicolon or they didn't, let me know because I'd like to be able to clarify that with teachers who ask me. So involve lots of standing and dancing. Standing and dancing. It's there. Letter D, our last one. Thank you for your patience. I once wore them. I, first person pronoun, once wore them, past tense, to a music festival where, comma, which. So this student decided to do like I said and say, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the festival, which is something that involves a lot of standing and dancing. This one just decided to use a comma and which involves lots of standing and dancing and then closing with a period. And so that did earn the point. So apparently you are allowed to join two sentences with a comma and a pronoun that tells you more about the previous. Normally it's supporting whatever noun is right before it, not the beginning. It's not I, but it's supporting the last noun that's written in the previous sentence. So all of the Mrs. PVC are correct on this one. So um, some of you that asked me about social studies, science, biology, most of you guys are going to have on your 2 point questions, it's going to be part A and part B, where you get the point. If you have part A and part B correct, then you get 2 points. If you have part A or part B correct, you get 1 point. And again, I would be explaining underneath the sentence what would be the reason why a person did or did not get the point based on whatever question was being asked up here. Another um, type of question that they might ask you. They might give you a cause, because I looked at all of the science, biology, US history, and social studies questions, and there was one that had to do with a cause and effect relationship. So they basically asked you what are two effects that could happen because of whatever the cause was. So that would be answer one for 1 point, answer two for the second point. So if you got one, if you gave one answer, you'd get one and two, you'd get 2 points. One or two, you'd get 1 point. If you'd have one nor two, you'd get 0 points. And then finally, the other one was um, what is the answer? And for part one, and why is that the answer? And sometimes, and many cases, the answer will be based on evidence that's in the text or whatever it is that they're showing your students for that particular question. So this is what I use when we get into some other reading skills. There's going to be a lot of cause and effect, actions versus reactions, and you see that I color coded them. Green, compare, contrast. A, part B, where the answer to part B caution is dependent on part A on those. So that's the one where if you don't have part A correct, it does not matter if part B is correct, you will not get the point. Reading, what's the conflict and what is the resolution? What is something that they give us and something more? Okay. Sometimes it'll be something different. So that would be a contrast. If they give you some sort of information and then whatever is next is the opposite, your students would have to recognize that would be a compare and contrast sentence series. Okay. Um, then we have the where every single grade level pretty much gets one. Um, what's their response for 1 point, also known as the answer? And what is the evidence for the second point? Now, on this open-ended, short constructed ones, it could be that your students decide to give the evidence first, because as soon as you know the topic, we're going to use that transition T for topic this time. As soon as they know the topic from the prompt, whatever it happens to be, they should go straight to evidence and write down some evidence. And so even though I have evidence second, you can put the evidence first and then based on that evidence, come up with an answer. Or you can leave it the way it is here, go straight from the topic T to evidence E to answer and response. You're just going to notice it happens to spell the word tear, Tear, or tear, Tear. And so those are the ways to get the 2 points. Notice that on short constructed responses, their responses need to be short. There's nothing about explaining on a short constructed response in order to get the 2 points. So that is my fancy little chart for checking multiple. Basically, it's sort of like if you look at the title line here, it kind of gives you an idea. You can do revising or SCR revising. Oh man, why did I put that twice? Supposed to start with. Remind me to fix that as well. My final copy. I'm glad that I do the videos with you guys so I can fix things before I send them. Uh, it's SCR, revising, reading. That's two things. Social studies, one of the ways that you'll see here in short constructed. Science, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, multi-part, where it's uh, answer 1 and answer 2. And regular multiple choice, where if you switch to this side and say, okay, this is letter A and why it's correct or not. They can check mark or an X, yes or no to determine. Okay, so that's what we have for you. Let me put my background back so that you guys can see me say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll be finishing the 8th, 9th, and 10th grade short constructed responses over the next couple of days because I want to spend the rest of October working on editing and multiple choice and uh, the non-multiple choice kind that are inline drop down choices. It's still multiple choice. It just your students have to select from a drop down list in terms of a cups mistake, normally capitalization, usage, punctuation, or spelling. And it will usually on drop down, it'll usually say the word error. The reminder, look here on my editing portion. You can see there that I got that one dirty. What error inline drop down choice or change, whenever it has that, it means that typically you're going to be doing cups. Thank you so much for watching. Uh, as always, please save to your favorites, repost, like it, share it with a friend, and maybe make a comment. Thanks so much and have a blessed rest of your day.